Yeah. What's up?
So how do you sort of decide when to just make a really deep tree of data versus a very sort of normalized or split apart,
Yeah.
more relational data?
Yep. What I found out is that Mongo is really good at changing how you model data because, like, if you think about modeling data from like a SQL perspective, it's more just, it has nothing to do with the application. It's just data. It's just like, how do I model this data so it fits the database? Whereas in Mongo, it's so flexible. You actually want to model the data how it fits the application. So my answer to that is like, how are you querying the data? What needs to see it and what does it need to see? If you have a route, if you have a screen on your app that's got like the user profile, it's got like this information about settings, and it's got like all the posts, maybe you should put all that in one thing so you can just hit it once and grab it all, right? Because it's built for your application versus like built for the database. Now, if you've built SQL, you might be thinking like, that's disgusting. Yeah, in SQL it is disgusting, but like in Mongo, it actually works. It's better for it if you do it that way. So for me, we model our data around what the application needs. That way, like we can just hit one route, do one database call, get everything we need for that page, and then we're done. We don't have to do like multiple database queries to like get this and then this and then this and then this just to put it on the page. It's like, oh, this one page needs all this. Put it in one thing. Done.
This was on Firebase that I saw this, which is also NoSQL, but I've seen instances where they literally write the same content in different places, just duplicates of the same content.
They'll denormalize. Yeah.
So like literally the blog post will go under user/posts, and also it will just go under posts, and also it will go under like category/category name/posts. And there, so you've written that blog post content in 3 places.
Yeah.
Is that madness or is that cool?
That takes it to an extreme level. I think at some point it's just like, that's a lot of work because you got to do a lot of like middleware to like keep track of all that, right? But there is some like really good benefits of denormalizing your data, right? So if you start off with normalizing it, as in like we got like a reference here but no reference here, but eventually you start to denormalize it where it's in 2 places. I think that actually really is a good place to be, but only if your application needs it. Like if your application is not asking for that, like if I have an org and a project and they both reference each other, when I ask for a project, do I need the org there? Like, why do I need that? Like, you know what I mean? So you got to think about the queries that you're asking for. And like, again, it's really going to be based off what it is that you're asking for. At some point, if your data structures look like that, if you're modeling data like that, then I would imagine your user experience is probably bad too. So like, you should figure out, you got to take a step back and realize like, what is the information you're trying to show your users, and then how do you model the data? But denormalizing it is not that bad. I would just stay away from like arrays and arrays together. Just working with arrays in general is just always going to be tough. If you've probably noticed, those are some of the most challenging things in the exercises today were arrays. So I would try my best to stay away from that as much as possible and add a reference on the other side as much as I can, unless there's just no way I can get around it because of the way I need to query data. So, yeah. You had a question?
Yeah. So it relates to the previous question, is that you said like whatever links together should be put in a single document. So I work for an e-commerce application and we have a lot of things going on in one page. We have shopping cart, we have shopping list, we have items and like all the items available and lots of stuff. So if we cram all these into one document, then we are at a disadvantage. So
well, you can't put like the whole app in one document, because then if you put the whole app in one document and then you query one document, you query the whole database.
Yes,
and that's
but
just like,
So just for like to show just the home page, we need all these stuff loading up.
Yeah.
So
the way I would think about it like that, right? So if you had a home page, what specifically is on the home page and only on the home page? Put all that in one document. You probably have other stuff around the home page that exist on other pages. Maybe those don't go in the homepage document then. They go in some other document because they are going to be used somewhere else. They just happen to be in the homepage. So I would just put specific things that are always together in the document together and like try to do, like for instance, if I was doing SQL, I would have a user table and then I would have like a user settings table and then I would join them and get the settings for the user. Whereas that doesn't really make sense because I'm always going to get the settings for the user like always. So I'll just put the settings embedded in the user and then I'm done. Right? So like you kind of got to take it step by step like that to understand like, why am I even joining this when I'm always going to get this anyway? It's like default, I'm always going to get the settings for this user. Why not just put it here? So it's like that type of thing. So yeah, you can't take it to the point where you're like putting everything in there because a document has a collection of a top of like 16 can't remember if it's 16 megabytes or 10 megabytes, the limit of what a document can be. I think it's 16 megabytes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 16 megabytes. That's the biggest a document can be. So you can't do that. Like 16 megabytes is just ridiculous. So yeah, don't push it that far, but group things that make sense together as much as possible, especially if you're like fighting around like transactions and undoing things because things break. You got to go back and like, all right, how can we change our data model to where we can just do all this in like one operation and take advantage of the nested structure. Yeah. Yes.
In this case, would it be possible to have multiple instances of Node? I mean, let's say like shopping cart, I mean, that's a good example. Even if someone is on a home page, you still need to keep a persistent shopping cart with the items and everything.
Yep.
Would it be possible to have one server only handle like the static content on the home page, for example, another server taking care of only the shopping cart?
Yeah, that's like a microservice architecture. A lot of people do that today, where they have these little servers that do one thing. Like this server does authentication, this server only handles users, this server handles like, whatever. Yeah, so like that's a very common pattern. That right there, that architecture, it can get pretty crazy because now you got to figure out a way to communicate between those different architectures, right? You need like some type of queuing system, like all different types of things. You might need a gateway that is a proxy that sits in front of it. So that just introduces a lot more problems. But yeah, a lot of people do microservice architecture, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they can all talk to the same database too, right? Because you can connect with just a string.
So in your practical projects, do you mix your relation in database also with Mongo, or because I mean they will complicate things? So I
think you can. I think if you're like the Targets and the Googles of the world, I think you just can't just use one database. Like it's just not going to solve your problem. You're going to have different scenarios, and you're going to have different needs. So there's nothing wrong with mixing two databases. We use Postgres for our analytics database, but we use Mongo for our application database, and they work together just fine.